Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a topic that's, well, uncomfortable, but really critical. We're looking at the persistent problem of custodial torture in India.
That's right.
Our mission here is to go beyond just the headlines. We want to unpack the different layers using court documents, reports, history, to give you a clear, concise understanding of, frankly, a complex human rights issue.
Exactly. And as we get into it, you'll see how what look like isolated incidents often point to, well, much deeper systemic problems. We'll try to connect the dots, between laws, police culture, and the often very difficult search for justice.
Okay, let's start with some recent alarms, things we're seeing in the courts right now. One thing that really jumps out from the recent cases is how active the judiciary is becoming. Courts are stepping in more directly. Take the Naveen case in Delhi just back in May.
Right, May 21st.
The Sessions Court ordered an FIR, that's a first information report against police officers, and even a hospital doctor.
Which is unusual.
It is. This was about allegations Naveen, or Monu, was tortured in the Shabad Dairy police station. And the court's wording, it was strong. It said custodial torture was a naked violation of human dignity.
Directly referencing Article 21 of the Constitution, the right to life and liberty.
Yes. And they ordered the investigation be handled by someone quite senior, an ACP rank officer at least.
Setting a high bar for the investigation's credibility.
Then, if we look east to Bengal, the Calcutta High Court in April, they had some pretty stark findings about police conduct in Midnapore.
Against student activists, female activists specifically.
Yeah. The court noted one woman, Sucharita Das, was grabbed by her hair, pushed, slapped by a female constable.
Physical assault.
Explicitly. So the court ordered a special investigation team, an SIT, to file an FIR and take it to a human rights court.
Again, direct judicial intervention pushing for formal proceedings.
And down south, in Tamil Nadu, the death of Ajith Kumar,
Yep.
a 27-year-old temple guard.
In Sivagangai district, yeah. Custody for a gold theft case.
His autopsy found multiple injuries, significant bruising. It led authorities to classify it, potentially as homicide.
Under the new criminal code, the BNSS, Section 196-2A.
Right, and the fallout. 5 officers arrested, 6 suspended, and a judicial inquiry is underway.
Serious consequences, at least initially.
And one more, from Uttar Pradesh. An Agra court ordered an FIR against police officers, unidentified ones, in this instance. This was after a man named Imran, arrested for cow slaughter, alleged terrible torture.
He claimed he was beaten, then shot.
To stage some kind of encounter narrative, basically.
Yeah.
Medical exam showed injuries that didn't match the official story.
Which casts serious doubt.
So the probe got shifted for impartiality. Looking at these cases together, it does feel like a shift, doesn't it, this judicial activism?
I think so, yes. There's definitely a pattern of courts being more assertive, pushing back against impunity, but it's crucial to connect this back to the bigger picture. These individual cases, as shocking as they are, they're really symptoms, symptoms of deeper systemic problems.
Okay, so let's talk about that systemic perspective.
Well, there's the Status of Policing in India Report 2025. It's a civil society survey, and it really lays it bare. It found custodial torture disproportionately impacts marginalized communities.
Like who specifically?
Muslims, Dalits, Adivasis, people living in slums, the poor generally. There's a clear bias reflected in who suffers most.
And the mindset within the police force itself.
That's perhaps the most alarming part. Around 30%, nearly a third of the police officers surveyed actually justified torture in certain situations.
30%? That's staggering.
It is. And other reports suggest thousands of deaths in custody happen annually, yet convictions extremely rare.
So impunity.
Chronic impunity, often rooted in those same social biases. It's not just, a few bad apples. These systemic factors, the biases, the culture, that's the why behind these cases popping up so often.
And this isn't exactly a new phenomenon in India, is it? There's history here.
Oh, absolutely not new. We can look back decades and see similar patterns.
Could you give us an example?
The Rajan case from Kerala in 1976 is probably one of the most infamous.
During the emergency.
Exactly. P. Rajan, a student, died under torture. His body was never found.
They were found.
His father fought tirelessly, filing a habeas corpus petition. That struggle became a real watershed moment, bringing custodial violence into the national spotlight in a major way.
A fight against the state, essentially.
Yes. And it highlighted the vulnerability of individuals against state power during that period.
And more recently, we've seen echoes of that kind of public outcry, haven't we?
Definitely. Think about the Jayaraj and Bennix deaths in Tamil Nadu in 2020.
The father and son, detained for supposedly violating lockdown rules.
That's the one. They both died from injuries sustained in custody. It sparked massive outrage.
And led to a CBI investigation.
Yes, a major probe by the Central Bureau of Investigation, and 9 police officers were arrested.
So these cases, Rajan back then, Jayaraj Bennix more recently, they really drive home the point, don't they? It's about systemic failure, not just isolated tragedies.
Precisely. The pattern is hard to ignore.
Which brings us to the really difficult question. Why? Why is accountability so hard to achieve in these situations? What are the root causes?
That's really the core of it, isn't it? And it's complex. There are several key roadblocks. A major one is the legal framework itself. India hasn't ratified the UN Convention Against Torture UNSAID.
Okay, what does that mean practically?
It means there's no dedicated, specific national law that criminalizes torture as a distinct offense, stemming from that international commitment.
But surely existing laws prohibit it.
They do. The new BNSS, for example, prohibits causing hurt to extract confessions and so on. But it doesn't define and criminalize torture per se with its own comprehensive punitive structure. And then there's Section 218 of the BNSS.
What does that do?
It effectively requires government-sanctioned permission from the state before police officers can be prosecuted for acts committed in the discharge of their duty.
Ah, so a major hurdle right there.
A very significant one. It creates a layer of protection that can be, and often is, a barrier to justice.
Beyond the law itself.
Oversight mechanisms are weak. We have police complaints authorities, PCAs, but they often lack real teeth. Limited powers, lack of independence. Their effectiveness is seriously hampered in many states.
And what about the practical on-the-ground issues?
Well, there's the reality of policing. Forces are often severely overburdened. Forensic capabilities can be limited, meaning there's sometimes an over-reliance on confessions rather than evidence.
And training.
Training has historically, and perhaps still does, focused more on the use of force rather than techniques of de-escalation, restraint, human rights standards, and proper investigation methods. This can sort of perpetuate a culture where torture might be seen wrongly as a shortcut or even a necessary tool.
This is a whole web. Legal loopholes, weak oversight, resource issues, cultural problems.
Exactly. It's this combination of legislative gaps, oversight failures, and practical operational challenges that allows custodial violence to persist despite appearing to be outlawed.
Okay, so knowing all these deep-seated problems, are there any positive signs? Is anything actually being done to fight this? Are there glimmers of hope?
Yes, there are. It's not all bleak. As we discussed earlier, the judicial activism is a significant positive development.
Courts ordering FIRs, SITs.
Yes, holding the system accountable from within. That's crucial.
And outside the courts.
The role of activism cannot be overstated. Families of victims, civil society groups, the media, they are absolutely vital. Their pressure, their refusal to let these cases disappear, like we saw with the Calcutta High Court example involving the students. That's essential for driving change and demanding justice.
Keeping the spotlight on.
Definitely. Public and legal pressure working together.
So those are positive forces.
Yeah.
But for real, lasting change, what's still missing? What are the big reforms that experts say are needed?
Right. For systemic lasting change, several key things are needed. First, as we touched upon, the explicit criminalization of torture.
Dedicated law.
Yes. Ratifying UNCAT would be a major step, followed by enacting a strong domestic anti-torture law that clearly defines torture and mandates strict penalties. Strengthening oversight. Bodies like the National Human Rights Commission, the NHRC, and those state-level police complaints. Authorities need more power, more autonomy, more resources to act independently and effectively investigate complaints against the police.
So legal changes, stronger oversight. What about the police culture itself?
That's fundamental. A deep shift in police training and culture is vital. This means a much greater emphasis on forensic science, evidence-based investigation, human rights standards, de-escalation. Basically, professionalism over brute force.
Embedding it in police reform agendas.
Absolutely. Moving decisively away from coercive methods. So yes, there's progress through the courts and activism, but these significant legislative oversight and cultural changes are still very much needed to tackle the roots of the problem.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it seems clear that custodial torture in India isn't just a series of isolated incidents. It's a widespread issue, hitting marginalized communities the hardest.
Yeah.
And while we see courts increasingly trying to enforce accountability, ordering probes and FIRs,
it is hopeful.
It runs up against these deep-rooted problems, the lack of that specific anti-torture law, the shields for officers, weak oversight, the cultural issues within policing. It all points towards systemic failures, really, rather than just individual misconduct.
It does. And perhaps understanding that systemic nature, the interplay of law, culture, oversight bias, it raises a pretty fundamental question for all of us, What kind of society are we actually building if the very institutions meant to protect people can also inflict such serious harm? And maybe what's our own role as citizens in demanding greater accountability and pushing for a culture where justice truly prevails?
That's a powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you'll continue to explore these important issues. Until next time.